Hello and welcome back. Since this week there is no Reddit League season, we finished the preseason and we're taking a 1 week break before the regular season starts. I thought I still want to bring you some sort of GeoGuessr content, in quotation marks. I thought I've not seen anyone do this before, so I've set up a template and I'm gonna make a GeoGuessr country tier list. Now, before I start this, let me just say that because I feel like I have to. This is my personal opinion, and the countries and the tier list are based on what I think fits for me. So, for example, I'm Austrian. I'm naturally gonna have a more easy time in countries that speak German. I'm naturally gonna have a more difficult time in countries that use an alphabet that I'm not familiar with, like Japan or Cambodia or Russia. Of course, if you are living in Russia or any of the other Cyrillic-speaking countries like Bulgaria or Serbia or whatever, you probably disagree with some of the things I'm going to put in some of the tiers. But that's not a problem. That's what tier lists are for in a way. They're personal and personalized. And yeah, I'm going to base this not on my general opinion on how difficult the countries can be or could be, if you will. Like, for example, let me just say Brazil, for example, is a good one. Brazil has an area code that isn't too difficult to learn. And if you know it, Brazil becomes a lot easier. I'm not really gonna take that into consideration, mainly because I don't know all of the tricks for all of the countries. So I'm just gonna order them based on how I generally do in them. And I've decided on the following criteria or tiers, if you want to call it that, which are S, which is basically I've got this. Like if I am in this country, I shouldn't have any problem. Like 9 out of 10 times at least, I can pinpoint it down to a couple meters. Then we've got A, which is usually not a problem, where it's like, generally, if I'm not in like a complete obscure part of the country, or if I'm not on like a long stretch of road which doesn't have any signs whatsoever, and I'm getting really unlucky, like let's say 8 out of 10 times, I should find where I am. B, which is please let me find some good signs, which basically means I should generally have a decent idea of where I am in the country, but if I don't find any good signs, I'm not going to be able to pinpoint anything. I'll tell you more about what exactly I use to differentiate between the tiers later when I start ordering countries. C, which is hopefully I get lucky, which means I don't really have a surefire way to identify which country I'm in, maybe even. Like good examples for those are like South American countries like Ecuador or Colombia, where it's like, if I find a sign that says the country name somewhere, or if I find a sign that says a city somewhere, I'm fine. But there is a chance that I don't find any such signs, and then I'm completely screwed. And I might not even get the right country. And D, which is not this country again, which is reserved for countries which I really don't like. I'm still not sure which countries I'll actually put in there. I'll have a look at that later while I'm doing it. But yeah, just know I'm not happy when I land in a country like this. That doesn't necessarily mean I can never get it right when I'm in this country. It just means that I'd rather not be. And whenever I see a country like that, I pretty much kiss my chances of a perfect score goodbye. All right, so I think it's time to get into this. I've wasted enough of your time. We're starting with Albania. Oh, actually, before I do that, I have to say one more thing. Mainly about which countries are in this. I've chosen generally all countries with a somewhat decent size of official Google Street View coverage. That means countries that have sort of businesses that had businesses do their coverage. Like good examples would be Lebanon or, for example, the Cayman Islands. They have decent coverage, but it's not official, and the camera quality, while being relatively okay in these two countries, is terrible in others. Like there are some countries, Fiji, for example, has a custom coverage, and that's awful. You can't read a thing. So I've decided to exclude all of them in general. Also, I have included Hong Kong, Macau, and Curacao, which technically aren't their own country, but they're so different from everything else. Like, basically, I can't include China because they don't have official coverage. So I might as well include Hong Kong and Macau because they do. And it's a bit more, and Hong Kong and Macau are completely different. So it feels better to separate them. And Curacao basically because it's completely different from the Netherlands. And I have some, and it's basically its own territory in a way, even though it belongs to the Netherlands. But that should be about it. There are countries in there that don't have a lot of coverage, but we'll see that. Okay, let's start now. Albania, first country. Now I'll do a quick. I'll tell you quickly. I won't tell you, but I'll quickly show you what sort of coverage the countries have. Albania to start off with. The good thing about Albania is that the Albanian language is very easy to differentiate from any other language in the world. If you know what it looks like, you can tell you're in Albania pretty much as soon as you get to the first sign that you can read. The bad thing about Albania, finding signs isn't always the easiest thing. You generally have, like, if you've got enough time, if you've got like a 3-4 minute time frame where you're looking for signs, you should find one. But you won't necessarily. Like if you're in an unlucky place, if you're maybe somewhere over here or over here, you might get unlucky. Which is the main reason why I'm gonna put Albania into here. Actually, or am I gonna put it into here? I'm not sure. Like this is one of the things I could have made. I could have thought about this a whole lot before and made this like a massive project, but that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be gut feeling. What do I think about the country? And I'm gonna put it into B tier. I might switch around a bit later on if I see, well, this country doesn't really fit in with the others. But let's not get into that too much right now. Next country on the list is Andorra. Now, one of the things that make comparing these countries difficult is size. Andorra is a really small country. So, of course, when you're in Andorra, chances that you're going to find something that helps you are pretty good. What's also really good in Andorra is that you've got a Catalan language, which is also, it looks kind of like Spanish, which, well, obviously it does, but it's different enough so that you can tell it's not really Spanish, in which case you're only really left with, if I just turn that off for a second, you're only left with this area here and Andorra. And Andorra is very mountainous, which is completely different to this area over here. So you should be able to easily tell you're in Andorra. And when you are, you should be able to find really any sign. If you find a city on a sign, you should be easily able to identify where it is on a map. So I'm gonna go for I've got this with Andorra. Like if I am in Andorra and I've got like at least 3 minutes of time, I'd be very disappointed if I couldn't pinpoint where I am. Next country on the list, let's move over to South America and find ourselves in Argentina. First problem of Argentina, it's absolutely massive. The good thing about it is that there's limited coverage in the southern part. Like, sure, that still looks like a lot, but it's single roads. There's not a lot of side roads going on anywhere. And usually you'll find signs that point to one of the biggest cities eventually. Another thing, this down here, Ushuaia and Rio Grande, which you occasionally get, they are very easily identifiable as well. They look very different from the usual Argentina. Like this, by the way, these two are beautiful cities. Let me just say that. But these two cities, you should be easily able to identify where you are here. Once you're further north, I generally have problems. Like you usually find decent signage for bigger cities, and you usually are able to figure out whether you like in which city you are of the bigger ones. Like you should be able to figure out you're in Buenos Aires when you are. You should be able to figure out you're in Cordoba or in Rosario, etc. Otherwise, there's a lot of just nothingness. Like there's a lot of streets that look kind of deserty. I mean, less of this, but further south, there's a lot of stuff that looks like this. And you're just not going to find much signs in this sort of area that point you to anything really useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Argentina in. Hopefully I get lucky for now. Because while there are certain areas in the country that I can easily identify, most of which I struggle with. Just from personal experience, I've had Argentina a couple of times in the last weeks, and I've always sort of struggled with it. So I'll stay here for now. Again, I might change this at the end. Next country we've got is Australia. By the way, I hope to God that I don't make a mistake in identifying any of those flags, because that would be embarrassing. The problem with Australia is it's rather big, and there's not a lot of stuff going on in the middle, which basically means you're somewhere on the coast usually. And if you decide to go on the wrong side of the coast, you lose a lot of points. And I mean, obviously, if you're like here, right next to the coast somewhere, okay, that is a bad example. But if you're on the beach somewhere like here, maybe, yeah, you can see the sea is to the east. You're going to go on the east coast, you're not going to lose a lot of points. The main problem is somewhere like here. You're not going to make it to the sea in time. And usually, like, there is a decent amount of signs with road numbers on them in Australia. And it's also not too difficult to figure out which big city you're in. Usually, like the likes of Melbourne, Sydney, Gold Coast, Brisbane, they usually tell you that you're there. Adelaide as well. But if you're somewhere on the outskirts, it may be difficult. The other problem Australia has is roads like this. Where, sure, you can probably tell that you're somewhere on this road, but can you tell where exactly you are? You're going to have to get lucky, or you're going to have a lot of knowledge about it. I mean, I'm going to assume like this place, like the roads here do look different than down here, obviously. But yeah, another problem you can occasionally find in Australia is terrible camera footage. Like camera footage with which, I mean, I'm not going to find one right now, but camera footage with which you probably won't be able to read anything, at which point you won't know where you are, basically, unless you make it out of that patch of camera footage. So I'm going to put Australia into please let me find some good signs. It's not that difficult if you get the right signs. And in general, the road names differ based on which, let me call it, province you're in. Like New South Wales, for example, this area has like A and B signs, B roads. If you go over here, you get a completely different type of road labels, let me call it. Those are sort of blue. If you move up here again, you'll get like normal white ones. You get a couple blue ones here as well, actually. But these ones, for example, are different because they're sort of like in a shield shape. You usually can make a good guess based on the road numbers. What I also can't forget about Australia is Tasmania, but that's usually not too much of a problem. It's got a decent amount of coverage as well. But it's also got sea roads, which aren't in any other part of Australia. So you should be able to figure out you're in Tasmania if you see one of those. But yeah, I'm going to stick with B for now. Austria. Now, I am from Austria, so this should be easy for me, right? Wrong. The main problem with Austria is that there's not a lot of coverage going on right now. You've got Graz, Vienna, Linz, and their surroundings, and one connecting road between Graz and Vienna. And you've got a couple of stuff around Innsbruck. The problem is that's all... Wait, let me find something that's on a road, actually. The problem with that is that none of that is official Google coverage. It's all done by a company called Interpix, which doesn't usually show up in the maps. So you can basically discount that. And the problem about Austrian roads is that they don't really have a good system from what from my experience. Like, just because you find a road number, you can't really tell where that is. And I personally don't know all too many of the cities around here. Or actually, let me rephrase that. I've heard of almost all of them, but I don't fully know where they are. So I can get unlucky there. Another thing, maybe a tip for some of you, I will try to, whenever I know it, I will try to give you some tips. One thing in Austria that's good is postal codes, because they're unique to each province basically has its own first number in the postal code. Postal codes are 4 digits in Austria. Vienna all start with 1. The parts around Linz all start with 4. And I'm actually not quite sure about Graz at the moment, but I think it's 7. Like in Styria, I think it's 7. I'm not sure though. Actually, let me just... Does that show postal code? Let me just have a look at that. It's 8 actually in Styria. Yep, it's 8. Yeah, so you can use that whenever you see one of those. Other than that, in Vienna, you've got something that I really like about a couple of cities. I've not seen it in too many. Is that you've got certain parts of the city. I'll show you a good example first in Bucharest in Romania. Bucharest is split up into different sectors, which is Sector 2, Sector 3. You've got Sector 6, 5, 4. You know, it goes around like this. And in Bucharest, you usually are able to find out which sector you're in. The same goes for Prague, which is split up into Prague 1, Prague 2 is somewhere around here. Then you've got Prague 3, 4, 5, 6. It all goes sort of in a spiral. Not fully, but sort of. The same is true for for Vienna. The only problem you've got in Vienna is that it doesn't actually show on a map. So while all of those different parts of the city, like Alsergrund, Leopoldstadt, Landstraße, Margareten, Neubau, Währing, Otterkring, etc., have their own number, which you can see when in game. Like if you go into this road and make your way to the edge of it. Yeah, there we go. Rochusgasse, and this is in the 3rd district of Vienna. And the same is true for all the others. The problem is, as I said, you can't see it on the map. However, it's also in sort of a spiral shape. Like the lower numbers are in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4 or something. Like 1 is Innere Stadt. Then I think Landstraße is 3, Wieden is 4, you know, that stuff. And then it goes outside until like 23 or something. Otterkring, for example, is 16. Yeah, and then it goes out here. And I don't know these, which is another problem of mine. But yeah, I think that's enough said about Austria. I'm still gonna put it at usually not a problem. I can deal with Austria. It's just not as easy as it may seem just because I'm from there. Next country, Bangladesh. I actually kind of like Bangladesh. It's usually whenever you're not in a big city, it's very difficult to tell exactly where you are. Because usually you're not going to find which little city you are on the map, because there's a lot of little cities on the map. And I've tried to look through the map a couple of times after having seen which city I am in, and it's very rarely ever worked. Like usually what's good in Bangladesh is if you know a couple of the bigger cities. If you you should know Chittagong, you should know Dhaka, Khulna. Like some of those, you should just know that they are on the map. You don't necessarily need to know where they are, but just know they're there. And if you find a sign saying one of those cities somewhere, then you can look for it on the map. But the good thing about Bangladesh is that it's very easy to tell apart its writing system from the others in Asia. Because Bangladesh, the Bangladesh writing system has this line through the top of its characters, like you can see here. Through the top of it, it's got this line. That is only really present in Bangladesh, so you can really easily tell that you're there. Yeah, beyond that, it's difficult. It really is difficult to say where exactly you are. And signs probably won't help you much in Bangladesh, let's be honest. Which makes it hard for me to put it on the list because please let me find some good signs doesn't apply. There are no good signs in Bangladesh, basically. If you're not in a bigger town, like if you're in Dhaka or Chittagong, you usually find your way around pretty decently. It's also usually not a problem. Like I get decent scores in Bangladesh, like 4,300 to 4,700 is normally doable. But hopefully I get lucky. I kind of have to put it in hopefully I get lucky. It's not, I don't dislike playing it, but it's not exactly one of the easier countries. Next on the list is Belgium. Let's move over to Belgium. One thing I also wanted to say that you've probably noticed by now, my map is in German. I would switch to the English map for this video, but GeoGuessr forces me to use the German map. You can't change that anywhere. So I decided it'd be a good idea to show you some of the problems that I have because I'm forced to use the German map. You've already seen it there with Vienna. It's got a different name in German. Which, in the case of Vienna, that's not a problem. That's the only city in Austria which has a different name in English. And, well, in Austria, it says Wien in all the signs. That's not a problem. Same is true for German. Like, those are the names that you'll find on the signs. Obviously, the opposite that I'm going to complain about applies when you're using an English map. Some of those German cities will be in English. The thing is, there's like 6 or so German cities that have an English name. Like you've got Munich, you've got Cologne, you've got Nuremberg, which basically still looks the same, it's just spelled slightly different. And you've not got a lot of them. I can't think of any others right now. But you know those usually. The problem is that the other way around doesn't really work the same way. Because take a quick look at the Czech Republic right there. You'll probably recognize some of those city names. Like Brno is the same in every language. It's the same in German, it's the same in Czech, it's the same in English. Prague is different in all 3, but it's still similar somewhat. Like you've got Prague, you've got Praha, which is the Czech version, and you've got Prague, which is the German version of it. Still, fine. Then you've got, similar to Prague, you've got Pilsen, which is, again, similar, not a problem. And then you've got stuff like this. German name for it is Iga. The Czech name is Chip. And how am I ever supposed to figure that out? Because if it was just capitals that have a different name, that's not a problem, you can learn those. The problem comes from the fact that it's basically 30% roughly, I'd say, of Czech cities have a German name. And it's really difficult to figure those out sometimes. Some of those aren't that difficult, like Budweis České Budějovice. You sort of get used to those, like Český Krumlov, Krumau, you can figure that out. Jungbuntslao is Mlada Boleslav. How does that make sense? I don't know. Yeah, and the thing is, there's a couple of countries where this applies. Czechia is a big problem. Romania is a problem. There's also a couple of those around here, like, for example, Diemerich is Deva, or Eisenmarkt is Hunedoara. Whoever thought of that. And you've got slight problems with that in not really in Lithuania, like some of them maybe, but mainly in Latvia. I don't know why in Latvia. I've never really thought about that too much. Why you've got German names in Latvia and not in any of the others around it, really. But you've got stuff like that. The first time I really noticed it was Vindau. Because before I started playing, before I ever was in Vindau, before I ever played GeoGuessr in Latvia, I had never heard of Vindau. I knew Ventspils, but I've never heard of Vindau. So when I saw Ventspils while playing GeoGuessr, I thought, of course I know that, it's in Latvia. I went to the map and I was looking for it. And it blew my mind. Like, it had to be a massive city somewhere in Latvia, and I just couldn't find it. Well, turns out it's right there. It's just got a different name. Same is true for stuff like Kirchholm, which is Salaspils, or Ogre, which is actually that wasn't the one I was thinking about. I think. I mean, it's still cool. It's still different in Latvian, but yeah. The other part that's different in the German and the English map is Cambodia, because in Cambodia, you see a lot of those smaller towns. They've just got Cambodian writing there, no Latin alphabet, and in the English map that's different. The English map does have Latin characters over pretty much all of those cities or all of those small towns, which makes the English map a million times more useful when figuring out where you are in Cambodia. Anyway, enough of a rant on this subject. Where were we? Belgium, I remember. Oh yeah, that's why I got to that point in the first place. It's the same for some of the cities in Belgium. You've got Lutich, which is Liège. Leuven is Leuven. I mean, that's I say that's easy. I didn't figure it out the first time I played it. I was confused. You've got Brugge, which is the same actually. Brussels, yeah. Again, you'll know the capitals. Those are no problem. But you've got a couple of those in there as well. Belgium itself is relatively easy actually. Like, you have some problems that, like, for example, the road numbering system has no real rhyme or reason to it. Like, road numbers are just, random pretty much. At least it feels like it. However, the good thing in Belgium is that in quite a few places, I don't know how many of them, but quite a few actually have the city name in their road signs. I'm pretty sure Leuven does. Let me have a quick look. Maybe I can find one of them. Does it say so? Yep, this for example. A street sign, this is the name of the street, and it says Leuven down here. So there's a couple more who have that, but that allows you to easily figure out, Google please. All right, maybe it'll fix itself. That allows you to easily figure out where you are. And in general, you'll find a lot of good road signs in Belgium, so I'd put this down as usually not a problem as well. Same as Austria. Has the map fixed itself? Sort of. Not really. Let me just reload it for a second. All right. All right. Next country is Bhutan. And I just want to say I love Bhutan. It's just so easy to immediately recognize you're in Bhutan, because if you just click anywhere in Bhutan, all right, that was maybe a bad choice of a click, but let me choose a different place. Let me go here. Also not the best click. There we go. This is what I'm talking about. These stones on the road. Bhutan is the only country that has them. Therefore, once you see those, at least as far as I'm aware of, there might be some countries not in Google Street View. There might be some rare places in some countries that I've not seen before. But Bhutan is the only country that I'm aware of that has these stones. And it's also incredibly mountainous. So that is another good hint. And Bhutan has surprisingly decent signage, which is very helpful when you're in it. And even if you don't find a sign, you're usually not losing too many points. It's also usually when you're in a bigger city like Thimphu or Phuentsholing, I have no idea how to pronounce them, by the way, if you've not noticed, they usually have signs everywhere that say where you are. So they're usually quite easy to tell. I just wanted to show you one more thing, regardless of Bhutan. Another tiny little place that has similar types of stones, which is Madeira. If you look at this, those stones look similar. But I mean, you should be able to, when you're on the coast like this, you should know that this is not Bhutan. But I just, for the sake of completion, they do have similar stones here. All right, we'll get to Madeira later. So yeah, Bhutan, I'm sort of in between these two, because I'm going to put it down as usually not a problem, because I said I love it, but you can get unlucky. There is some coverage in Bhutan that is just cut off, basically. Like if you land on one of this, like on this stretch of road, like usually good maps don't include that. But if you do land on it, you're basically just out of luck. Like you won't get any useful information from that. You'll probably be able to tell that you're in Bhutan. Yep, you've got those stones here. You can tell you're in Bhutan from that, but you won't find where. So that's probably one of the only reasons why I have to push it down from S into A. Next country is Bolivia. So let's move over there. One thing about Bolivia is that it's not got a lot of coverage. So usually when you're in Bolivia, which by the way is something I just noticed, I didn't actually notice before, but you're pretty much only in this area. And you usually are able to find signs, like let it be official signs or just some storefronts that tell you which of these cities you're in, whether it's La Paz, Cochabamba, Santa Cruz de la Sierra, Sucre, or Potosi. You usually find those signs relatively easily. The problem you might have with Bolivia is if you're not in one of these cities. If you're somewhere over here or somewhere over here, you might find it difficult. But even then, usually Bolivia is not a problem in that regard. Pinpointing in the city is a whole different beast, but we'll ignore that in this case because I feel like it's unfair to include that in some cases because it might be difficult to pinpoint in some Brazilian cities as well. But in the countries with less coverage, I've got less variation, if you know what I mean, on how to judge that. So I'm just not going to include it at all. Like there are certain cities that are just horrendous in pinpointing. One of my favorite examples for that is Rome, where I can't find anything in Rome. Lisbon is another example where I'm just completely lost. All right, back to Bolivia though. I'm going to put this at usually not a problem as well. Because now that I do know that there's not a lot of coverage out of these places, because usually I always think like whenever I'm in Ecuador or Colombia, I kind of take Bolivia into consideration. And now that I know this, I shouldn't really. And when I'm actually in Bolivia, I usually am able to find out where I am. Next country, Botswana. Now, Botswana is a bit of a special case because it's very big and it's got coverage in quite a lot of different places. It's kind of similar to Australia in a way, that you can be basically anywhere in Botswana, but you've got very limited roads, like a very limited amount of roads that are covered. Basically, usually whenever you're in Botswana, you're either on this road right here on the A1 between Gaborone and Francistown, or you're somewhere in this area over here. That's where I've usually experienced it. Rarely, very rarely over here. And I don't think I've ever been down here. And Botswana is also quite easy to tell apart because the road looks like this. And you've got a very dry sort of climate. It looks similar to South Africa. But the thing is, in Botswana, you hope to find some signs. If you find a sign that says either of those two cities on it, Francistown or Gaborone, you should know those two. That tells you you're in Botswana. The other city I'd like to mention that is important is Kasane, because you can land in this sort of area up here. And if you do, the only city that a sign will ever point to that's big enough that you'll find it on the map is Kasane. Signs up here probably won't tell you where Francistown or Gaborone is, which signs down here might do. So that is another city that's good to know. Probably looking at it, one of these cities up here will not hurt your chances either. So with that said, I'm going to put Botswana in B. I can generally relatively easily tell when I'm in Botswana, but knowing exactly where you are gets difficult. And it's also very difficult to pinpoint because that's just a long road with absolutely nothing on it. There's barely any side roads. So when you're on this stretch of road, my condolences, good luck. Next country, Brazil. As I said before, Brazil does have area codes. I can never remember whether it starts with a 1 up here and goes to a 9 down there, or whether it's the other way around. But it does have area codes. So that could help you when you find signs. Regardless of that, I think Brazil is horrible to find where you are. You have to pretty much get lucky in finding which province you're in. If you find a province, which by the way, I usually look out for that, they're usually in the 2-letter combination that you can see at this zoom level. So you can usually easily, if you see a 2-letter combination somewhere in Brazil, zoom out to this level, not too far in, because that'll, But if you're far enough zoomed out, you can easily tell which province they're talking about. In terms of coverage, there's not a lot going on in the Amazonas area over there, the Amazon River, and the rest of the country is pretty much full of coverage. Another thing about Brazil, well, dirt road is not good to show that. Can I find a better road for this? Yeah, Brazil usually has those two yellow lines in the middle, so watch out for that. Brazil is also the only country with Portuguese in South America. So yeah, well, it's generally that makes me think about maybe yeah. You know what? I said I hate Brazil, but I'm gonna have to put it in C because it is easy to tell whether you're in Brazil. The problem is just it doesn't help you much most of the time. But it's Portuguese. The road features are very distinctive. I'll have to give it that. And usually, when you're in a big city and you have got a bit of time to move around, you'll probably figure out which city you're in. And most of the big cities are on the coast somewhere. So if you find a road number near a big city, you can probably look through the coastline and see if you find it. But the road numbers, again, they don't really make all that much sense. So those alone won't help you much. I might have to put that down into D later on. I'll see whether I can find countries that are worse than Brazil. Bulgaria. It's the first country on the list with Cyrillic as its writing. The good thing about Bulgaria is that once you're used to Bulgarian city names, they're somehow different to other Cyrillic countries' names. I can't really explain how, but it's just a feeling that I often get. is there anything else that's good about Bulgaria? I'm just having a quick look at the road numbering system, but that doesn't seem to make much sense. That's whatever. So yeah, Bulgaria is just... signage is alright though, I'd say. Like when you're on a bigger road, you can find pretty decent signs. But I'd be lying if I said I like being in Bulgaria. Am I gonna put it here? The thing is, it's quite easy. Like a lot of these Bulgarian cities have easy to recognize names in Cyrillic. So even if you don't know how to read Cyrillic, a lot of them are easy to recognize. Russa, for example, is one that often comes up. Sofia, obviously the capital. Burgas, those are easy to recognize in Cyrillic. So that bumps it up a bit. If you're in rural Bulgaria, you're probably going to struggle with finding out exactly where you are. But it's not as bad. The thing is, it's not as bad as Argentina, Bangladesh, or Brazil. So I'm going to put it in B for now. Now, Cambodia. I already mentioned before, Cambodia is difficult on German Google Maps because it's got a quite decent amount of coverage. And you even find a lot of signs that say the name of the city or town you're in. The problem is you can't read them on the map. So, you do occasionally find road numbers, which can be useful. They kind of follow a system. Like like low numbers are down here. They start sort of with 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But still, you don't often find road numbers. I'm gonna have to put Cambodia in here, because hopefully I get lucky is exactly the thing that applies to Cambodia. Hopefully I get lucky and see a sign that says, I don't know, Poi Pet on it, or Siem Reap. I don't know how to pronounce any of these either. Canada. I like Canada. Canada is like the good brother of the USA. As in, it's equally as large in terms of west-east, but it's got a lot less coverage towards the north. So you're usually somewhere around here, which doesn't help you much if you don't know which side of Canada you're on. The good thing is, this side is very mountainous. This side speaks French, and they do have different kind of road markers as well. Like, for example, one thing that I recently found out, which is very helpful if you ever land there, Nova Scotia have brown road signs. You won't find those anywhere else in Canada, so that is a good thing to remember. Actually, I'm not sure. Newfoundland? No, they don't have them either. Quebec, speak French. Again, easy. When you're there, you'll figure it out. They do also have they do have unique road signs as well. They look similar to the ones, for example, in Ontario, but they're green, whereas the ones in Ontario are blue. So you can tell them apart that way. Other than that, you often find decent signage in Canada. That's the one thing that I differentiate most often between Canada and USA. You find decent roads, decent signs in Canada pointing you to cities that are further away. You rarely find those in rural America. Sometimes problems occur when you're somewhere like in the middle of nowhere. But most of the time, you're absolutely fine. I've actually rarely ever been up here in the Yukon area. I mean, should be official Google coverage, right? It is. But, you'll figure that out as well. It's usually fine. So yeah, I'm actually going to say Canada. Usually not a problem. I have struggled in the past occasionally with stuff that's around Saskatchewan or Alberta. What's also, I mean, this is a bit overkill maybe, but what you can do to, because it's not as often as in the US, but people in Canada, I've seen it before, hang out their provincial flag. So at least knowing the flag of Ontario might help you, because it's relatively easy to recognize. And if you know that, you can maybe discount Quebec when it's not French. You can discount Nova Scotia for not having brown road signs. You can discount Vancouver because it's not like British Columbia, because it's not extremely hilly. So you're kind of left with these three. And you do often see what I've noticed a lot of signs pointing to Manitoba when I'm in there. I don't know if that's just confirmation bias, but I did notice that Alberta should have signs to Edmonton or Calgary. It's just Saskatchewan, which I've found to be a bit of a problem occasionally. But yeah, Canada, definitely an A for me. Next one on the list, Chile. Now, Chile. It's similar to Argentina in the sense that it's massive in terms of a north-south. It goes very far north, it goes very far south. The thing is, in Chile, you often are close to the sea. And if you find a good sign there, you can just move along and look for a road number maybe, or look for a city that you found. But, the other good thing is, if you know a couple of the cities down here, like if you know Punta Arenas, remember that. If you see that, you're down here. Otherwise, you can pretty much ignore everything down here. Again, there maybe remember Cochrane, maybe remember Coyhaique. And just with those, you can basically ignore everything below this point, like this line here, if you don't see any of those. Which leaves you with still a quite big country, but, it's better. But yeah, I don't really have much to say about Chile. Just remember the big cities. If you do that, you'll mostly be fine. Also remember, like up here, very deserty. Like really, that's the Atacama Desert up there. If you move further down, you'll see less of a desert. You'll see a lot more. Let me maybe go to somewhere less city-like. Let me go up here. It's not very, it's still quite kind of dry, but you're not in a desert anymore. And you've got a kind of mountainous area to the east. The further south you go, the more green it becomes. That's always sort of a good guidance in Chile. Very dry, very deserty, go to the north. The more green it gets, go further south. You'll sort of get a feeling for how far south you have to go. For Chile, I'd say, please let me find some good signs. I think that fits quite well. If you find signs to decent cities, like it doesn't have to be the capital, it doesn't have to be a large city. Like that's the difference for me between Chile and, for example, Argentina or Cambodia. There's a lot more cities in Chile that are feasible to find on the map. Colombia. The thing is, I kind of like to put Colombia and Ecuador in sort of the same place. To me, they're almost indistinguishable in terms of their features. They both speak Spanish. They both have a lot of very rural places, a lot of mountainous roads where you can go for minutes without seeing anything useful to you in terms of actual city names. But the one thing that's good about them is that both relatively regularly put their country flag on signs. So you shouldn't struggle too much with finding a sign and figuring out that you're in either of those countries. Beyond that, though, it can get really difficult to figure out where exactly in these countries you are. I was constantly going over Ecuador. I'm talking about Colombia right now. The one difference between those two is that Colombia is much bigger, which doesn't help. But if you look at, let's just have a quick look at the difference in foliage. Like this, and for example, let's go down here. They don't look all that different, to be honest. Like, sure, of course, some of you who might be a bit more familiar with foliage and stuff, like, sure, the earth looks a bit different. There might be some different trees, but I can't tell personally. So yeah, it's not really something you can use very well to differentiate between the north and the south of Colombia. Colombia, again, has a couple of cities that you should remember, though, like Bogota, Medellin, Cartagena, Barranquilla. There's a couple of those, Cali, I don't know. Ecuador has a few of those as well. Again, they're quite similar. And I'd like to put both of them in C for now. Like, I did speak about both of them. Let's quickly look for Ecuador. There we go. Put both of them there. They almost have the same flag as well. It fits perfectly. Croatia. Croatia is one of the countries in Europe which I'm not too fond of based on their signage. The thing about Croatia is that it's got a lot of islands as well where you could be. And their road numbering system doesn't make any sense. And usually they don't put road numbers on signs to begin with. Maybe one of the reasons why they decided to not put road numbers on them was because you wouldn't really gain anything from it anyway. But if you're somewhere around like this area or somewhere over here maybe, you'll struggle to find big cities on signs, which definitely is a problem. Also, don't forget that down here is Croatia as well. Dubrovnik, if you see that on a sign somewhere, remember, just because it gets cut off here by Bosnia, that's still Croatia. So yeah, I'm gonna have to put that. I think it's kind of difficult. Like, should have thought about this more before, but B and C tier are kind of similar in the sense that both require me to find signs. Actually, I'd say Croatia. Okay, the thing is, Croatia doesn't have good signs really. Like, sure, if I find a big city on a sign somewhere, the thing is, I do know more about Croatian cities than I know about Ecuador. Actually, do I? I mean, I know some of them, but I'm kind of debating whether to put Croatia in B or C. But let me just have a quick look at Europe as a whole. I feel like when I'm in Europe, there's not a lot of countries that I'd actually put below Croatia. Thinking about it. You know what? Putting Croatia in C for now. I might change this up again, as I said. The next one is one of the ones I talked about before. That isn't really a country in and of itself, but it's got its own Google Street View coverage, and it's very different from a lot of other places. And it is Curacao. It's easy to recognize, though. I'm just gonna quickly put it at A. It's not too much reason to talk about it in detail. If you see Dutch and it doesn't look like the Netherlands because it's a Caribbean island, go with Curacao. You'll usually find plenty of signs to places like Willemstad, Jan Thiel. Find maybe one of these, Westpunt if you're over here. You'll be fine in Curacao. But actually, do I even want to put this in S? No, I don't, because when you're in Willemstad, the difference between Curacao and Andorra is that Andorra itself doesn't have big cities. In terms of size at least. And Willemstad is really massive. So when you're in Willemstad, it's actually somewhat difficult to figure out where exactly you are. So I'm gonna leave Curacao in A for now. All right, Czech Republic next. I have shortly talked about this before on the issue of German names and the German Google Maps. The thing is, my problem with it is, I know a lot of Czech cities by their Czech names. So if it was displaying the Czech names on the map, I would actually put this in A. The road numbering system is a bit as well. Like, sure, it's got some kind of system to it. I can't really figure it out from looking at it right now. I mean, the red roads have the system of going around like this. You've got 1 here, you've got 4, you've got 6 and 7. Don't know where the others are. We don't need 2 apparently. 3 is down here. Yeah, that's just that's 2. I guess that counts. So yeah, it's just in a spiral as well. So that is helpful. Yeah, I'm gonna have to put it in B, because again, a problem with Czech. Actually, no, that's not a problem with Czech cities. With the Czech map, because the thing is, while the cities are the roads itself don't really make much sense in terms of the small ones either. You do at least find them on signs regularly. It's the same thing with Slovakia, which I might just go ahead and put No, actually. You know what? I'll do Slovakia right away, because it fits well with the Czech Republic. Because the one thing that's differentiating the two is that I can see the Slovakian names on the map. Therefore, and I know a lot of Slovakian cities, I basically know, wherever I am in Slovakia, I know one big city near it. And you usually find road numbers on signs, and you usually find decent enough amount of signs. So yeah, I'll put Slovakia in A right now. Usually not a problem. I'm fully aware that I recently, I think it was even on the Reddit League season, we were in Sturovo or near here somewhere, and I didn't find it. I know that, but yeah, it's still generally, it says usually not a problem. And I'll stick with that. Denmark as the next one. Denmark is sort of a mixed bag. If you're near a big city or in a big city, it's relatively easy. And you also, you find a lot of road numbers everywhere. Like Denmark, signs with road numbers on it are everywhere. The thing is, if you find a sign with a road number around here, is that really going to help you much? Let me just have, because road numbers itself, like the small ones, they don't make too much sense. Like you've got a lot of 100s and 500s here. You've got 300s here. And 100s, 300s, 200s here. Like they do look like they can't just be random. Like they do look like they have some sort of system to it. But I couldn't tell you what it is. So I'd say usually you're fine in Denmark. I don't want to go as far as put it down as an S, so I'm going to put it as an A. But yeah, I've never really struggled too much in Denmark. I've had the odd occasional, the odd round where I've been somewhere in the middle of nowhere and I couldn't find a bigger city close to me. But that's all like a question of time, I guess. If you've got 5 minutes, you can pretty much find anything in Denmark. If you've got 1 minute, well, that's also something. I usually, while doing this tier list, I have sort of a round time limit of about 4 minutes roughly in mind, because if you reduce that to about 1 minute or extend that to 10 minutes, this tier list would shift massively. Like if you put that at a 1 minute time limit, stuff like Bhutan would definitely be an S. Botswana would maybe go up to an A because it's easy to tell sort of where you are. Whereas Brazil would probably go down to a D because you've got basically no chance to find anything in that time. Again, Bulgaria might go down a tier. Australia would definitely go down a tier. But, we'll keep 4 minutes roughly in mind. Next up is Estonia. And I think I'll do all of the Baltics at once while I'm at it. The thing about Estonia and Lithuania and sort of Latvia as well partly is that they've got a very distinct sort of road. If you've got sort of a road like this where you're next to woods and you see, I just clicked randomly somewhere in Estonia. I can just click somewhere else. you'll see sort of got forests everywhere. You can move somewhere else, like move here. It's forest. It's just forest everywhere. So if you see forest anywhere, or if you just, like, Lithuania is exactly the same thing. There's forest everywhere. You can pretty much click randomly on Lithuania somewhere and you'll find forest. And it's very distinct in a way. So those two are really easy to recognize. Latvia is similar, but slightly different, I feel like. I don't know why I feel like it. But there's a bit less forestation going on, in my opinion. Like, you'll still find a lot of forest, but not quite as much as in Lithuania or Estonia. Again, this might be completely biased, but that's just my personal experience. Yeah, in terms of road signs pointing you to towns, I'd say they're about equally meh. Like, usually the thing is, they've got languages which are fairly easy to recognize. So you can easily tell where you are. But finding the exact town becomes difficult. The road numbers don't really make any sense in either of those countries. And pinpointing is hard, but it's easy to tell where you are, roughly. You know what? I'm gonna put Estonia and Lithuania, if I can find it, there it is, into A. It's usually not a problem. You should get decently close. Sometimes you can't pinpoint because you can't find the exact village. Happens. And I'm going to put Latvia, for reasons I mentioned before, into the B tier, because some of the town names are just a struggle. Like, if I find one of the bigger cities, especially if I'm close to Riga, it's usually fine. But if I'm not, then it can suck. Next one, France. I know this might surprise some of you, but I'm actually debating whether I'll put France here. Because, take a look at France. Take a look at how dense that coverage is. France has so many little towns everywhere and so many department routes that show up multiple times in each and every department in France and tell you absolutely nothing about where you are. Like, just look at this. Like, this is a natural park. Why are there 700 towns in here? If you're in rural France and you don't know exactly what you're doing, or you don't recognize any of the city names, you're pretty much out of luck. Like, you need to recognize foliage. You need to recognize trees, or maybe the climate a bit. There are some cities which are fairly easy to tell apart, like Dunkirk, for example, has this very specific feel to it. I mean, this is a bad example of it. Maybe I can find a better one. Main Street in Dunkirk, maybe. Yeah, it's just, Dunkirk itself is very distinct for some reason. Some of the other cities are quite easy. Paris is quite easy because it tells you which arrondissement you're in on the street signs, usually. So Paris is quite easy. But I not gonna lie, and we did a tournament on the Reddit GeoGuessr. I think it was 1.5 years ago, and I lost my quarterfinal round solely based on the fact that I couldn't figure out I was in Montpellier. I just couldn't. I was in a massive city, and I had, I think, it might have been 4 minutes, might have been 3 minutes, but I couldn't figure out where I am. I obviously know I was in France, but I just couldn't figure out where exactly. Even though I was in a big city. And I still hold a grudge over that. Also, what you have to be careful about, if you see French, you might also be in Réunion, which is right down here. Which, it's sometimes difficult to tell apart. Like, if you go through it long enough, and if you find stuff like Saint-Denis, you can. It's also got slightly different trees and stuff, but I don't notice that sort of thing. But the road numbering, like the signs, everything is completely the same as in France. So be careful of that as well. So yeah, I think I'm actually going to put France in D. I don't like seeing it. I really don't. I hate the country. I have to mention, I speak French, or I don't speak it that well anymore, but I can read it. And even that doesn't help me, because even in cities itself, it usually doesn't tell you which city you're in anywhere. Sometimes if you find a museum or stuff like that, sure, but not on signs. They don't tell you anything. And that's why France will stay in D. Germany. Enough with the rant. Germany is actually, for me, it's a lot easier than Austria. I don't know why, but for some reason, I feel like, actually, that's a lie. It's not easier. It's just as easy for me to tell which city I'm in. And there's a lot of signage everywhere. There's not a lot of Germany covered. It's quite simple. There's not a lot of coverage. But the thing is, you usually end up with decent points. Even if you play a German map, because the coverage is quite spread out. So if you find the right city, you're usually sort of fine. And yeah, as I said, it's quite easy to find the city name somewhere. Just remember, if you're playing with the English maps, remember some of the German names. Like Köln is Cologne, München is Munich, and Nuremberg is pretty much the same, just spelled slightly differently. Those are the main ones that you should remember. And yeah, you should do just fine. Also, Germany. I don't know if I'll luckily find some. Yeah, exactly. If you see this anywhere, you're in Germany. A lot of censorship. All right. Usually not a problem. Yeah, do I want to put in an S? No, it stays in an A. It can sometimes be a bit annoying trying to pinpoint in some of the German cities because they're quite big. Like, the thing is, Berlin is actually quite decent in terms of its structure, and it's got a lot of different districts, and they usually tell you which district you're in on signs. Munich is a bit worse in that regard. It's a bit more difficult there from what I've seen, or from my experience. And also, you can occasionally get problems over here in this area. Because that's a lot of cities close together. So you can find signs saying, Essen that way while you're actually in Dortmund. So you have to be careful of that. But still, it stays in an A. Ghana is the next one. Ghana does have... It's another one of those cases where it doesn't really have a lot of coverage, but it goes through the whole country. And it's just very select few roads. The thing is, in Ghana, you're usually close to one of these three cities, like one of these four cities: Accra, Cape Coast, Sekoni Takoradi, or Kumasi. And it's also usually quite easy to tell you're in Ghana because it'll tell you everywhere. Like, usually if you're in Ghana, within 1 or 2 minutes, you'll find a sign that says Ghana somewhere. It's exactly the same in Kenya as well. They'll say they're in Ghana. And also they do speak English, right? Yeah, they do. So you can tell by that as well a bit. The thing is, if you're not near any of those, you'll have to find some good signs. Let me just put it there. It's not too difficult, but sometimes you get a bit unlucky. Oh god, the next candidate for the D, Greece. Because the thing is, the Greek alphabet it is more difficult than the Cyrillic alphabet because a lot of letters in the Latin and Cyrillic alphabet are the same or very similar. And the Greek alphabet is quite different in a way, with the exception of some letters. At least that's what I feel like. So, and also the Cyrillic alphabet has a lot of usage. Like, it's used in Bulgaria, Ukraine, Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia, Russia, Kazakhstan, even though that's not on Street View, Mongolia, it's used everywhere. So it feels like it's worth it to learn Cyrillic for that. Greece is one country that is sort of decently big, but not massive. And the thing is, in Greece, knowing the alphabet often just doesn't help you to begin with, because you'll end up near like a tiny town somewhere, and you just, even if you know that means Kastanica, what are you going to do with that information? Usually you can just, if you see a sign and you really think like that's a bigger city that could help me, you can just go to the map and compare writing. Because here it does say it in both alphabets anyway. So really, if you have the time, sure, go ahead and learn Greek, but I don't see it as a requirement. Let me say it that way. The thing you have to be really careful about in Greece is, at least, I mean, there's a lot of smaller islands, but at least recognize whether you're in mainland Greece, Crete, or Rhodes. Like, these three are... if you go down here somewhere, and the real place was up here, or the other way around, you'll lose loads of points. So it'd be pretty good if you could tell those apart. They do... you do often find signs saying Crete or Rhodes somewhere on those islands. So you should generally be fine if you've got enough time. Like in a sort of 2-minute round, I'd be a bit worried. But if you've got like 4 minutes, it should be fine. The thing is though, Greece, I'm split between C and D, because there are some, like if you're on a major road, you do generally find decent signs of where you are roughly. The same is true if you're in a city, you'll usually find out where. So I'm gonna put Greece here. The main reason why I'm putting it there instead of D like France is the difference in size in the country. Like, Greece is sort of a C minus. It's really close to falling down to D, but not quite. The next one is Guatemala. Well, the thing about Guatemala is, if you're up here somewhere, it can get really tough. If you don't find any signs, good luck. You're going to need it. The one very good thing about Guatemala is that Guatemala has a different lettering for the roads, depending on which province you're in. Like if you look at Solola, here they've got CA. Although CA may just be the general for Guatemala. Let me have a look. But Chimaltenango, for example, has CHM. If you're near there, you can see that. Quetzaltenango has Q something. Let me just find one. There, it has QUE. There as well. It's just difficult to figure out sometimes, because those road numbers show up at different zoom levels, and it's just a whole lot of a mess. You've got signs like 12N around here. You've got SM for what is that? For San Marcos, which if you find SM somewhere, you know you're here. But I've had experiences in the past where I found a road number, what I thought was a road number, on a sign while playing in Guatemala, and it was different on the actual map. Like it totally didn't show up, or showed up as a different road on the map. So those things can happen. Generally, if you're in a city, you should be fine. They often label stuff there. If you're up here, well, good luck. Again, they do have their own for El Pitin, they have PET on their road numbers. So again, if you find a sign, you should be fine. you're just not often going to find a sign. So, well, please let me find some good signs is pretty much perfect for Guatemala. You're going to need them. Next country is Finland. And Finland is quite similar to Sweden in a way, with the main difference between the two being that the Swedish road numbering system makes sense, the Finnish doesn't. Because the Finnish road numbers are sort of all over it, like they are somewhat ordered in a way that lower numbers are generally further to the south and higher numbers are further to the north. Like you'll find 40s down here and 80s up here, but it's just too similar. Like you'll find an 87 down here, and you'll find that next to 75. And if you go slightly further south, you'll find 72, 69. Like that does seem to make sense. And you find a 58, for example. Suddenly then there's a 44 over here. And that's just a whole lot of stuff that doesn't make too much sense to me in terms of road numbering. But there's also quite decent signage. Not in terms of road numbering, but in terms of telling you this big city is 50 kilometers away. That usually happens quite often in Finland. If you're sort of close to one, or sort of on a bigger road, like if you're down here somewhere on a side road, you'll struggle usually in Finland. Same for Sweden, exact same thing. You're not going to find too much because you won't see any road numbers. And again, like these blue road numbers, and they don't really seem to make all too much sense. What you always have to remember in Finland, if you see red 3, you're in Åland. Because there is, as far as I can tell right now, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. At least last time I checked, there is no red 3 in mainland Finland. So if you see those, or generally if you see Mariehamn somewhere, you're in Åland. The good thing about Finland is that usually if you look at it at this sort of level, any of the cities you can see here are good to remember if you know where they are. Like Inari is always a good one if you're up here, because there is coverage that goes all the way up here. And Inari can certainly be useful. And down here, the usual Rovaniemi, Kuusamo, Ulo, Oulu, Kuopio. Those sort of cities, if you know them, that's great. You should be fine. I'm going to do Sweden as well. Let's put Finland in, usually not a problem. Actually, yeah, usually not a problem because there's one main difference. Okay, let me talk about Sweden for a second. Because the thing is, Sweden has the big problem of having some places where there's absolutely nothing. In the sense of there's absolutely no big city. There's lots of small towns, which means that you see a lot of signs that basically say this small town is 5 kilometers this way, this small town is 2 kilometers that way, and this small town is 1 kilometer that way. But you know none of them, so they're not helpful. And usually if you get further north, you'll see signs to cities you may recognize. But especially down here, it's very difficult to figure out exactly where you are. Also, if in Sweden, never forget about Öland and Gotland, because they can come up as well. I don't actually know, does Bornholm have coverage? Yeah, Bornholm does as well. If you're in one of the big cities, you're usually fine. The good thing about Sweden is the road numbering makes sense. The blue roads especially. Because the low numbers are down here. And the further north you go, the higher the numbers get. Like you've got 94 here, 97 here. But keep in mind, let me just quickly find, I did look at an example. I just need to find it again. Where was that? Was it up here? Yeah, there it is. Johannesholm. The 26, you can see it's like next to the 66, the 62, the 70. You'll think, what's the 26 doing here? The 26 goes from Johannesholm here all the way down here to Halmstad. That's the 26 right here that goes somewhere along this way. And Swedish roads get their number based on where they start from the south. So that's important to keep in mind as well. So if you see a number, like if you go north and see a low number, you can think that that number started very far south to begin with. So keep that in mind. And I'm gonna, despite that, because you rarely find good signs in Sweden, I'm gonna put it in a B. The next one is Hong Kong. Oops, I closed it. Let me just had a quick cut. I closed my Google Maps window. Hong Kong is the first of the Chinese territories that I'm going to discuss next to Macau. And Hong Kong is actually quite easy to recognize, mainly because you'll see a lot of Chinese characters. And if you, for example, can't differentiate between Japanese and Chinese, don't worry. There's something else useful about Hong Kong. They've got a lot of English-influenced street names. If you look through here, you've got, for example, you've got Reclamation Street, Prince Edward Road. You've got a lot of those buildings have English names like Fortune Crest or Lehman Building. You've got Argyle Street, Nathan Road. And the south side of it as well, you've got stuff like Wellington Street here. You've got Gage Street, Peel Street. And if you look at this, that they will actually say that. I mean, that's not where I expected to end up. Maybe I should go to different. But again, this, for example, says Graham Street. Like they will say the name in English characters or in Latin characters. And you'll find a lot of Latin characters around Hong Kong. So you should be generally fine there. You've got a lot of space in Hong Kong where you could place your guess. You're most usually around this area. So I'm gonna put Hong Kong in usually not a problem because, as I said, you're usually around here. But when you're on the outskirts, it can be a struggle to pinpoint. I've had that before, where I knew I was in Hong Kong somewhere, but I just couldn't figure out where exactly. Next country is Hungary. And I quite like Hungary as well. Because you usually find different decent signs, that's what I wanted to say, in Hungary. You've got a couple of instances again of Germanized names for me, which is annoying, but not a lot of them. Certainly not enough for me to actually mind it. And you usually get sort of decently sized cities on signs, at least from my experience. Wait, there's another one of these towns. Where did I have that before? Isn't that the exact same as here? Yeah, it is. All right. Why ever that is, I don't know. Anyway, I feel like Hungary is it's similar to the Czech Republic, I guess. And its signage, let me have a quick look at the streets. Do they make sense? Yes. Yep, they do. They start up here with 2s, then go 3s over here, 4s, 5s, 6, 7. That sort of thing. So you can actually tell where in Hungary you are. That makes me put it up to an A. Iceland, S. Straight away. I love Iceland. The road numbering makes perfect sense. They start down here with the 3s. They go with the 4s, the 5s. With the 6s over here, the 7s are here, the 8s are here, all the way over here. Then you've got the 9s. And you've got the 1s all the way down here to the 2s. 4s over here as well. Iceland usually has signs pointing to decently sized cities. You've got, because you don't have a lot of cities in Iceland. Important to remember what I found recently. There's a road called F88 here. That's and there's F905 here, F26 here. If you find F roads, there's somewhere in the middle of the country. Usually, you've got a couple of here, a couple over here as well. This is just important to remember. If you find F roads, you're not on the coast somewhere. Another important thing to remember in Iceland, if you find Keflavik, it's here. You can tell it somewhat by the airport here, but this is Keflavik. You'll often find signs saying that, even if you're here somewhere. You'll find that often, but it doesn't say it anywhere on the map, which is a problem that I struggled with the first time. But yeah, Iceland is great. I love it. To show you the coverage of it, most of it is around the outskirts of it. And you'll find lots of signs with road numbers on it. It's brilliant. S tier. The next, Iceland, that should be Indonesia then. These are ordered by the alphabet. So this is Indonesia, and we've got Monaco somewhere down here. There's Monaco. Indonesia. Wait, let me just have a look at, are the Faroe Islands covered? They are, aren't they? Let me have a quick look at this. Is that official? That is official coverage. Are the Faroe Islands not a state? Are they not a nation? Interesting. Well, they're not in this tier list. I don't know why I didn't find them, but alright. What was I? Oh yeah, Indonesia. The problem with Indonesia is, back to the usual, it's massive. And I don't understand Indonesian. And the main problem for me with the Indonesian language is that it's really difficult to tell apart what could be a city name and what isn't. Because to me, every word just looks the same in some regards. You do well to remember a couple of cities, because if you see one of them, they always help. The thing about, Indonesia is massive, and it's split up into loads of different islands. You can be in this island, you can be in this island, any of these, or in Sulawesi, on Sulawesi, I mean. So that makes this whole thing a lot harder, and you don't find a lot of signs. You basically, do you find any signs? I think you find some signs over here. You do, however, find the city. If you're in a city, you'll find the city name written somewhere. You do find that regularly, but signs Indonesia really seems to struggle with. So I'm going to put Indonesia into C tier. It's not as terrible as France, because at least it doesn't give you the illusion to know where you are. And, well, yeah, you've at least got the coastline to work with. Usually you can sort of use that a bit in most cases. And there are not that many small cities, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of big cities around that usually some signs point towards. It's doable. Ireland. Oh, by the way, road numbers? I've never seen them in Indonesia. I can't remember ever seeing a sign in Indonesia that had a road number on it. I don't know why, actually, but it's just not a thing, apparently. Ireland. Ireland is nice. I mean, part of it is probably because I've been there before. I know a lot of the towns, and the road numbers do sort of make sense. Like, not necessarily the N, like the national roads, but the small roads, the R roads, they do sort of adhere to the principle of it's like sort of going around in a spiral again. Like it starts with a 2 over here and just sort of goes around this way, like these. And there's a lot of bigger cities in Ireland that signs usually point towards. You'll get a lot of signs saying which highway which highway is close to you, stuff like that. Oops, don't move Sweden. Which makes me wonder, am I gonna put Ireland into S tier or A tier? The thing is, you can sometimes... No, the R roads are too good. R roads are too good. I'm going to put Ireland in S tier. Alright. Next up, another very interesting country is Israel. Because Israel has a lot of coverage over here. And it's very narrow, but a lot of it is close to the sea. It's actually quite similar in form to Chile. The problem is, in Chile, you often get signs telling you which city you're in. In Israel, you don't. So what I would say is that in Israel, if you're somewhere down here, if you're somewhere, which is quite counterintuitive actually, but if you're somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Israel, you usually have a decent chance of finding out where that is. If you are somewhere around here, or here, or here, I've never found a sign. Like, okay, sometimes you do find signs. Mainly what I found, for example, while I was having a look through stuff, hotels in Tel Aviv usually tell you that they're hotels in Tel Aviv. But if you're going through some random roads here, you don't find anything. I can't read Hebrew, of course. But the thing is, you often find signs actually saying stuff in the Latin alphabet. Okay, maybe not that often, but all the road names are in the Latin alphabet. But that doesn't help you at all. The city names are so rare in Israel. I closed the fucking tab again. Alright. I'll be back in a second. Alright. As I was saying, city names in Israel are so rare that I never find them. I just don't. The one thing you can look out for is if you are relatively sure you're not going to find a city name in Israel, what you can do is try to move as west as you possibly can and see whether you can reach the sea somewhere. Because, for example, if you are in Jerusalem, and to be honest, you can't go on the street, not some random photosphere, not hamburgers. You can't tell the difference in architecture between Jerusalem and other cities. Like Tel Aviv architecture, for example, looks a lot more modern than Jerusalem architecture. But the other thing you can do, does that actually say Jerusalem on it? Nope, not even that. That looks like a prime sign that would say a city name on it, but it doesn't. Neither does the bus. Yep. So just move to the west and see if you can find the sea. And if you don't, maybe go Jerusalem, maybe go like Nazareth up here. Any of these. Yep, so I'm gonna put it in C. Because there are, like, if you aren't in a city, do I? Because I'm basically banking on, like, if I'm down here, I can find where I am. Anywhere here is fine. The thing is, you're not down there that often. You're mostly up here. But then again, if you're down there, it becomes really pretty easy because you've got those green numbers as well, which are decently easy to spot, even though they don't really follow much of a system either. I mean, they do actually. They tend to go up when you go north, so that's fine. Yeah, we'll stick with C for now. Maybe we'll think about it again afterwards. Italy is the next one. Italy. The good thing in Italy is that you often find signs pointing to bigger cities. That's the one thing I'll give Italy. The bad thing is those SS roads are just not really useful. They go throughout the whole country. They don't really follow a system. Like you do, there has to be some way to figure out where you are that's better than that. But Italy is a really big country as well. Like you can sort of get a feeling on whether you're like all the way up here or all the way down there. But anywhere in between is difficult to tell. You can also relatively easily check whether you're in Sardinia, because usually Sardinia signs would point to either like Cagliari maybe, or any of those towns around here. Like checking Sardinia, if you think you're there, doesn't take too long. That is always worth it. If you think you could be there, if you've got like 30 seconds, a quick check, worth it. But where would I place it? I'd place it in B, actually. In the let me find some good science category, because I definitely know they are there in Italy. Japan. Now, Japan is a difficult one. If you're in a big city, if you're, for example, in Tokyo or Kyoto, you'll know where you are. You'll find signs. Japan also has a lot of different road signs that you can find. The problem with Japan is it's got a lot of islands. And with that, I mean a lot of islands. Like all of these, this island over here. I mean, Hokkaido is technically an island as well. From experience, mostly on Hokkaido, I've been fine, because there's not a lot of those blue road numbers on Hokkaido. There's basically 38, 39, 40, 44, and like 12 around here, and 5 down there. Those are Hokkaido. So you can quickly check it. But everything else is just a struggle. And you're so often on an island in Japan. And the good thing is you do often find signs telling you the outline of the island. I don't know exactly which one it is, but I've found some Japanese islands a few times through that. But there's so many of them that if you don't have a long time to check, it's difficult to find which one you're on. Okinawa usually does tell you that you're there based on the signs you find. I've got a photosphere again, of course I have. Let me just have a quick look where I can find when signs just show you. Maybe not in the city would be better. Give me a second. If you're somewhere on the outskirts. Yeah, Okinawa signs all look like this. Sort of a blue on a white sign. Can I find another one? And they usually wait, went too far. Wait. Yeah, it's this one. They usually tell you in kanji as well as Latin characters. Not always, but usually. Is this one? No, it's empty as well. Okay. That one as well, though. Like, it has English on it. Usually, I closed it again. Why am I so stupid? 1 second. All right, I've opened up a couple in reserve now. So if I close one again, we should be fine. So I'd like to put Japan. Put Japan in B as well. Because if you find good signs, everything's fine. And you don't really have to get lucky. Thinking about it again, there's a couple of countries down here that might fall into that category as well. But I'll think about that later. Now, Jordan. Let me have a look at Jordan. Jordan is usually... It's hard to tell. Like, there's usually a lot of signs in Jordan. I'll give them that, that's for sure. But the names on the map often don't really line up with what the names on the signs say. So that's somewhat difficult occasionally. But there's not a lot of coverage either. So you usually can't tell which part of the country you're in, whether you're somewhere around Amman or somewhere down there. I think you can you've got a decent chance to find road numbers as well. I'm not going to spend too much time on Jordan. I'm going to put this at a B as well. Good signs, but I don't really need to get lucky. Kenya is the next one. Yep, Kenya. As I said with Ghana before, it tells you which country you're in basically everywhere. The thing is, it's often difficult to find exactly which place in Kenya you're in. The thing is, it does often tell you which county you're in, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of signs which say that, but I've struggled with it nonetheless. Then again, it's a small area of the country that's covered, and you can usually just look through the map and see if you can find the little cities the little towns you're in. So I'm gonna put Kenya in an A actually. It usually shouldn't be a problem. Next one is Kyrgyzstan, which is up here. The thing about Kyrgyzstan is it's not exactly full with signs either. If you look at it like here, a lot of the coverage though is around Isikul, which, okay, that's a beach. Mainly that's a photosphere. But if you see a rather large lake somewhere, you know where you are in Kyrgyzstan. Bishkek, usually you should see whether you're in a big city or not. If you're in Bishkek, like the other option you've got is Osh, and I'm sure like Osh you can remember how to spell that in Cyrillic. Same goes for Bishkek. You'll find that written somewhere. It's usually not a problem. It's also quite good if you remember how this looks like, because that's fairly unique. This area and this area. Like this kind of road, that means you're somewhere up here. So that should tell you something. Yeah, and you occasionally find signs for towns close to you. But when you're down here, it can be tough. Then again, there's not a lot of the country that's covered. So actually, yeah, I'd put Kyrgyzstan in B. If you find some good signs, you should be fine. But it's not the easiest thing in the world. Next thing is Laos. Next country. I was on the fence on whether to include it, but it does cover a few cities. Mainly Vientiane. And it also covers Luang Prabang. As well as Pakse. And I think it was like 2 more. Let me have a look where I can find Savannakhet as well. And was there one more somewhere? Up here somewhere, maybe? I can't find it right now. I think there was one more. But yeah. Usually when you're in one of these cities, you'll find signs saying where you are somewhere. So I'll put that in usually not a problem as well. And it's relatively easy to figure out you're in Laos because they like to put their flags on a lot of places. Lesotho is the next one. We're sort of... wait, how many are these in each row? 8, 16, 24... 40, we're sort of halfway done. I'll try to be a bit quicker. A lot of these are relatively easy to judge. Lesotho, it's relatively easy to figure out that you're there. Usually, same as I'll do Lesotho and Swaziland, or Eswatini as it's now called, at the same time, because they're quite similar as well. Usually, you'll find signs pointing to the capital somewhere, and you'll find another couple signs pointing to some other random small places that you're never going to find. Now, a lot of the places are not so difficult to find. And they're not exactly the biggest countries, so you can just go through them relatively quickly and check whether you find them anywhere. So I'd put them both in usually not a problem. It can be difficult to pinpoint exactly where you are, but getting close, there it is. Getting close is not too much of a problem generally. Next country that goes to S tier, Luxembourg. Brilliant. Very easy to figure out. Because on the entrance to every town in Luxembourg, it tells you which road you're driving on, which is an absolutely brilliant system. And the road numbering is quite easy to see through as well. Like, it's not perfect, but the 100s are generally in this area. And if you go further north, you'll find the 300s here. And the 200s are somehow just around Luxembourg somewhere, like a couple of them. Not a lot of them, but some 200s around Luxembourg City. And it's really easy to just... Let me just quickly show you. You saw that in the last leg of the preseason last week as well, but just to quickly show you again. If you drive into a city, in this case Kautenbach, it says the road number you're on right above it. It's 322, as you can see right here. Perfect system. S country, no discussion about that. Macau, I'm debating, do I put Macau in an S? I kind of have to, yeah. Macau goes into S as well. Because it's very easy to tell you're in Macau, first off. You've got Chinese characters with Portuguese. So that alone is enough to tell you, well, obviously it has to be Macau. And Macau is relatively small as well. So you always somehow eventually make your way to the sea. And from then on, you can get a decent look. For example, if you make your way to the sea here, you can get a decent look. All right, there's stuff to the north. There's the bridge. We're probably in the southern part of Macau. There's a massive tower. That is the Torre de Macau, I think. Yep, the Macau Tower. So if you spot that anywhere, you can sort of judge where you are. You've got a lot of signs pointing you to the airport. It can be a bit difficult to know which road exactly you're on, but that's often a case of like 2 or 3 points that you're missing. So it has to be a S country. The next one on the list is Macedonia. So let me just get over there. Macedonia doesn't have a lot of it covered, and you'll find a decent amount of signs. And if you remember some of the bigger countries, like obviously Skopje, but also some of the bigger cities like Titovo or Kumanovo, which are fairly easy to remember even if you don't read Cyrillic, then you should be fine. Just sort of remember the layout. The European roads are covered, and a few of the bigger highways like the A4, the A3. Nothing else is. And usually, again, what I've seen in Macedonia, not so much as in Montenegro, which I'll speak about soon, but you'll find country flags, quite a few. And you should, in Skopje, if you're there, you should be able to find the name of the city. So I'd say, again, usually not a problem. While I'm here, I didn't even put Montenegro up there. Well, I don't know why I didn't. I'll just tell you real quickly. Montenegro would probably go in there as well. Lots of flags in Podgorica especially, which makes it very easy to figure out where you are. Yeah, I think I'm kind of debating whether I might... No, it's fine. It's fine in A. Next country is Malaysia. To the other end of the world again. The nice thing about Malaysia is that you've got, again, I can't remember, like in Guatemala, for example, you've got different sort of letters for different districts. The thing about Malaysia is that it's a bit more difficult to realize which letter means which district. Like Johor is easy, it's a J. But why there's a C here, I don't know. Why Kuala Lumpur has an E, I don't know. And a B. But you'll find B's up here. You'll find the A's up here generally. And you'll also find a lot of signs in Malaysia. Like generally, really, which is confusing to me because it's right next to Indonesia, and Indonesia has no signs at all with road numbers on it. And Malaysia is overflowing with them. So, well, the consequences, Indonesia is in C, Malaysia is in A. Malta, S. Malta is an S tier country. It's, again, similar to Bhutan. It's one of the easiest to recognize countries in the world. Because if you look at this kind of brick style building everywhere, which is even more recognizable if you go outside of the big towns. You always everywhere have those small brick walls, and they're everywhere in Malta. Also, the language is very easy. Like, okay, the language is English, but the Maltese city, like town naming language, and like, you know what I mean. The names of the streets and stuff, they're incredibly different from everything else. So that's easy to tell as well. The only thing that I have experienced, I don't know if that was one bad example, but you've got a city called Zeebrugge here, which is called Haszeebrugge, but that doesn't show up on the map. And you've got another one right, where was it? Somewhere around here, there. You've got another one there that's called Eastzeebrugge. I don't know if there's more of these, but that is a bit of a problem. I lost a couple of points through that occasionally, like one time. Anyway, still, S country. Mexico. Well, let me say the good thing about Mexico. They've got a lot of road signs that's like their road signs say Mexico on them. So you know that you're there. The bad thing is I don't really know much about Mexico. Like, I don't know a lot of Mexican cities. So I don't know if it's fair for me to judge them too harshly on not giving me a lot of bigger cities. Because I don't even know many big Mexican cities. I'd say it could be worse. But Mexico is pretty big. And the road numbering system doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, it's just, I mean, sure, you've got single digits here, you've got like low 10s, then 40s somewhere, then it goes to higher numbers like 70s, but then it goes back to 50s, 100s. Well, actually, maybe it does make some sense. It's not perfect, but I can remember that. Maybe it's not that bad. You know what? Mexico goes into B. If you find good signs, you're fine in Mexico. Monaco. I'm sure you expect me to put Monaco in A. In S, I mean. It's going into A. You know why? Because pinpointing is annoying in Monaco. Because look at how many damn roads there are. And look at the state of this. And it's, from experience, I can tell that it's not 100% accurate on how it looks in real life. So that's why it goes into A. It's definitely one of the easier countries in A. Where did I put it into S? So I'd like to put it up here. But it's not S tier for me. Then again, it's incredibly easy to recognize if you've ever seen Formula 1, for example. Mongolia is the next one. The thing about Mongolia is it's got quite a bit of coverage. And if you're not in Ulaanbaatar or north of it, it's incredibly difficult to tell where you are because everything looks the same to me. Like, sure, if you're in Ulaanbaatar, it's quite easy to tell that you're there because it's a massive city and you'll see houses everywhere. If you find snow, you're north of Ulaanbaatar. Snow, see? There's snow. Anywhere around here, snow. So if you see snow and think it's Mongolia, put your marker anywhere here. All the way up here, usually dry, but with a slight green. It's not a complete desert. Down here, that's where you've got the complete desert. Like, there's literally nothing. And that's the main problem with it as well. If you're not near Ulaanbaatar, it's very difficult to tell where you are. Like, if you look over here, that's a bit more distinctive. You've got some mountainous roads here, but if you just look slightly further, this looks completely different, but it's difficult to remember those slight, how am I supposed to say this? Like, just because that one little area has a distinctive look to it. It's very difficult to remember that for like 50 areas over here. And over there, everything looks the same because it's all just desert. Like if I go over here, that's just, well, that's not really, is it a desert? Does that count as a desert? I don't know. But it's still, you're not going to find anything here. There's no signs around there. One thing that's important to know, this sort of stuff, that's Mongolia. If you see your car to look like that, that's one thing that you can use to tell whether you're in Mongolia. So I'm gonna say Mongolia goes here, because usually you are in Ulaanbaatar or to the north of it. So you usually don't lose a lot of points, which goes quite well with the hopefully I get lucky, because if you're not, you got unlucky. And it's not that bad. So we'll go with C. Netherlands is the next country. And I've never been a fan of the Netherlands in GeoGuessr, honestly, because while there are a lot of decently sized cities that I know around, but the road numbering system doesn't make any sense, and even in the big cities, I've often struggled with finding any signs that actually tell you where, like in which city you are. And if you're somewhere like on the complete edge of the country, like somewhere where there's no big cities, you usually don't find a lot of signs telling you of cities that are a couple of kilometers, like 50 kilometers away. Like big cities on signs isn't really that much of a thing, unless you're on like a highway in the Netherlands. So I'm gonna have to put it into B. Like it's definitely a step below, it's definitely a tier, it has to be a tier below Belgium, which I'd like to compare it with, because in Belgium, at least when you're in a city, you know which city you're in. That's not necessarily the case for the Netherlands, at least from my experience. New Zealand is the next one. And, well, I kind of like New Zealand because it's quite easy to tell whether you're there, but I've not really had a lot of luck with finding specific cities in New Zealand. And I've actually, surprisingly, I can't really remember playing New Zealand too often. Like I would have thought I'd played more often, but I haven't, so I can't really talk too much about my experiences with it. The road numbering system looks fine. Starts with low numbers up here, goes to high numbers down there. So that's great. So I'm just gonna put it into... it's better than Australia, I have to put it into A. Yeah, I'd say that's fine. It's relatively easy to tell whether you're here. Nigeria, whether you're there. Nigeria doesn't have a lot of coverage. You do well in remembering the bigger cities like Lagos, Ibadan, Abuja, Enugu, Benin. If you remember those, you're pretty much fine. Maybe remember Ovo as well. I've seen that a couple of times. And yeah, you usually find plenty of signs telling you where these cities are. So I'm going to have to put it into A. It's usually not a problem. Norway. I love Norway. I'm slightly biased towards Norway because I really love the way the Norway's road numbering system works, which is basically you've got numbers with 1 around Oslo and to like the south, not the south, well, the southeast and the south and the east part of Oslo. Then you've got 2s as well in a similar area around here. And then you've got 3s here in this area. You've got 4s down here. You've got 5s starting from like here in this area. You've got 6 slightly further up. There are roads starting with 6. And you've got 7. Then you've got 8s further up here. There's 78. There's like you do get some exceptions. Like 12 is probably named because it continues the road E12, which is confusing, but that's the only reason I'm probably not going to put it into S tier. And there's one more reason that I'll tell you soon. But you'll get the 8s up here. You get the 9s all the way up here. Like if you look at this, more west. I'm not zoomed in enough. There's still an 8 here, and there's still an 8. Where are the 9s? Maybe there are no 9s here. Anyway, the other big problem in Norway is that you're usually not going to find anything if you don't find a street number or a road number. And it's not unusual for you in Norway to just click for about 3 minutes before you find a street number or a road number. God damn it. So it's difficult to tell exactly where you are without finding one. Once you have found one, it's brilliant. And usually, if you're in a bigger city, there's mentions of the city name everywhere, so that's fine. But yeah, that takes it down a bit. And what you also have to remember, if you find a sign saying E6, just forget about it. It's completely useless because the E6 starts here and goes all the way up here before ending right there. Right there. So it goes through the whole country and it doesn't tell you anything. Norway, A. But I'd like to put it up there as well. Peru is the next one. And Peru's difficult. Because there's a lot of small cities in Peru, up mountainous roads, where there's not a lot of signs telling you where exactly you are. So that can certainly be a spanner in your works. If you're somewhere near the coast, it's absolutely brilliant. Like if you're on the road, like if you're on the 1S, you usually find signs telling you which city you're close to, and you can just find that easily. Near the Titicaca Sea as well is pretty easy. Same goes for anywhere on this road up here. If you remember these names, these city names, then you'll have a pretty easy time. Same goes for up here, near Iquitos. But other than that, if you're anywhere in this sort of area, like up here somewhere, you can struggle occasionally. So I'm going to say it's a B tier, but a good B tier. With some good signs, you can find where you are in Peru relatively easily. Now the Philippines. I'm a bit conflicted about the Philippines. Because the thing about the Philippines is that it usually tells you almost everywhere where you are. It's just really difficult to find it on the map because you've got so many different islands with so many different provinces on them that it becomes really difficult to know where all of them are. Once you've figured it out, it's not too much of a problem though. Because as I said, you generally do find a lot of signs. And it's also relatively easy to know that you're on the Philippines based on the language you see. So I'd have to say, yeah, it's usually like, I'd say it's a B. Some good signs are all you need. Some good signs and some good luck while looking through the map. And it's just nice to have that, that in a line. So we need one more in B and preferably 5 more Ds. Poland. Poland's quite nice. The problem about Poland is that it's really big. As usual with some of these countries. I mean, it's not a huge country, but it's too big for for searching through all of those little towns. Again, the road numbering system is it's kind of all over the place. Like, it just looking through it like this, it doesn't look completely random. It looks there's some sense or reason to it. But it looks like something you'd have to learn and remember. The good thing about Poland is that usually in the cities you are in, you'll find decent signs. You'll also find decent signs to those cities. You'll find plenty of signs with road numbers on them. But yeah, there's so many small towns that I kind of have to put them into B. If I just look at, then again, I've put Hungary into A, as well as Slovakia. If I put those two into A, I kind of have to put Poland there as well. Actually, no, the Hungarian road numbering system makes sense. Poland goes into B. It's not a bad B. Probably above Peru. Actually, let's take Peru down a bit. Like there's not really any ranking inside of the tiers, but I just, Portugal. Well, I hate Portugal. Again, obviously only in the context of GeoGuessr. I can't pinpoint in Lisbon to save my life. And I can't find any small towns either. What you also have to remember with Portugal is that Madeira is covered. I've told you before how to recognize that. And also the Azores have 2 islands that are covered. Which, if you see an island and it's not like a Portuguese island and it's not Madeira, probably one of these two. The problem with recognizing islands in Portugal is that you can't just go, oh yeah, I see the sea, it has to be an island. Because pretty much all of Portugal is next to the sea. So that doesn't work. Also, what I've found while looking through Portugal earlier, I clicked on Viseu on a random place in the town, and it spawned me right in front of a sign saying Viseu, which was a bit unusual because usually I have a lot of trouble figuring out which city I'm in Portugal. Like from my experience, they don't really say that too often. So I struggle with that slightly too. And yet road numbers are a bit all over the place in Portugal as well. So I'd have to put Portugal. I'd have to put it into B though. Like, I know I said I hate it, but it's not as bad as Brazil or Argentina or Greece. You know what? I'll kind of have to sort of put the whole thing a bit down, I think, later on when I've finished. Give France a bit of company. Because Portugal in B doesn't feel right, but it's not as bad as these countries. Next is Romania, and I like Romania. I've told you about Bucharest before. The road numbers in Romania make a lot of sense because you've got, especially if you look at the red ones, and you often find those red ones on markers beside the road and on signs everywhere. You've got the ones, numbers that start with 1, that go to the north. And the thing about Romania is that you can infer the road numbering system solely from Bucharest. If you look at Bucharest, you've got the ones. If you just draw lines from here to here, the ones cover this area. The 2s cover this area. The 3s cover this area. The 4s cover this area. Well, the 4s don't really cover anything because the 4s only have this and this road. There's no other 4 roads in Romania, red 4 roads. The 5s cover this road and this road. Cover this area, and the 6s cover this area. And the 7s do everything between the 6s and the 1s. This is still true up here. You've got the 1s here, the 7s here. You'll have the 6s down here, with some 5s here, 5s down here. You'll have the 3s over here. You'll have 2s. That's the one thing. 2s you'll have over here. And there are a couple of 1s in between, sure, but it's not really a problem. And if you paid close attention, you might have noticed those are also exactly which sector, where the sectors are. Sector 1 is pretty much covered by the 1 roads. Sector 2 is the 2 roads, Sector 3 is the 3 roads, etc. I really like that. And as I said, you find stones or markers on the side of the road with those numbers on it pretty often. So I kind of, you know what? I'm going to put Romania into S. I really like Romania. Russia. Russia. I'm not good at reading Cyrillic. I'm learning. I'm getting better. But Russia is huge. And I'm not too worried about rural Russia. I can sort of tell whether I'm on the European side, whether I'm down here, whether I'm all the way over there or over here somewhere. Like usually around here in this area, you'll find a lot of Latin characters still on town signs. You'll have a completely different climate down here. The thing I'm worried about is cities. I have no idea how, like, I can't tell apart cities in Russia if I don't see the city name written somewhere. I can't at all. So that's a big problem because there's a lot of Russian cities that are all big. Like I can't, while I'm in the game, I can't tell apart Russian cities by size. Because sure, Moscow is bigger than Nizhny Novgorod or Omsk or Novosibirsk. But I can't cover that much ground to check that in like 3 minutes. So I have to find the name somewhere, and from my experience, Russian cities don't really have their names everywhere. The one good thing about Russia, though, is that when you're in a rural area, you will often find signs that generally point you to cities 500 kilometers away. For example, I recently played a practice round, which was somewhere around here, in this area, and I found a sign, like an intersection, with one sign pointing me 500 kilometers to Krasnoyarsk that way and 500 kilometers to Irkutsk the other way. And I'm good at recognizing some Russian cities just by how their Cyrillic looks, even if I can't necessarily read it. So I instantly recognized Irkutsk and Krasnoyarsk and knew we had to be somewhere here, which narrows it down a lot on where you actually are. Can't remember which city it was right now, but it doesn't matter anyway. So that's a good thing about Russia. The bad things outweigh the good things a lot, though. I am going to put it into B, though, because it applies. Please let me find some good signs. If I find good signs in Russia, I'm completely fine. It's just those don't necessarily come up too often. Next, San Marino. Now, do I want to put San Marino in S or A? I kind of have to put it in S. Like, the same things apply to San Marino as they do to Andorra. It's a very small country. It's relatively easy to tell whether you're there, because I personally recognize almost all the San Marino cities. I recognize Dogana, Serravalle, Domagnano, Cayungo, San Marino Città, Murata, Fiorentino, Faetano. I recognize all of them. So if I see them on a sign, I know I'm in San Marino. I reckon you'll find a lot of signs pointing towards Rimini, for example, as well. So for me, San Marino is just really easy. And sure, you've got a lot of it covered, but you can make your way through a lot of that in a couple minutes. So I just have to put San Marino into S. And I know like there's a lot of small countries there, but that's just the way it is. Small countries are easier to play in GeoGuessr. Next, we've got Senegal, which, probably to the surprise of a few of you, I'm going to put into S as well. Because Senegal is, first off, it's very easy to recognize you're in Senegal, because there's only two French-speaking African countries covered in GeoGuessr. Those two are Tunisia and Senegal, and they look completely different. Tunisia is very bright. Like, if you look at this, it's very like almost white-ish. It's still beige, but white-ish architecture. If you look into the city proper, you'll see that almost everything is sort of white. If you go a bit outside, a lot of it is just by the sea as well, which helps. I mean, that doesn't really help, but you know. You'll recognize Tunisia easily. Senegal is very similar in a way, but it's a lot darker. Like, it's a darker white, if you know what I mean. And the roads are a lot more sandy. Like you'll find a lot more sand in Senegal in general. And the thing I really like about Senegal, I'll try to find the sign again. I looked this up earlier. I think it should be somewhere around here. It's this one right here. Just as an example, those signs are everywhere in Senegal. They look like this and they point you to 3 different cities close to the intersection you're in. And if you know 3 cities in Senegal, because there's not a lot of small towns in Senegal, those signs generally point you to big cities. One of them on the sign, even though it wasn't great in terms of readability, the one you could read was Bambey, which as you can see right here is a big city. Diourbel is another one that shows up a lot. Touba, Thiès. Those are cities that you often see on signs like these. And they're really helpful to judge where you are. Also, the good thing about Senegal is that the southern part of it isn't covered. So you have to mostly focus on this part. And you can look at this. I've never actually been there in GeoGuessr, I think. This doesn't show up too often. But everything around here is really easy to tell apart and pinpoint. So I really like Senegal. Serbia. The thing about Serbia is, like until about 2 months ago, I wasn't even aware Serbia was covered on on Google Street View because I'd never gotten it. I think I've gotten Serbia like 2 or 3 times in my life on GeoGuessr, and I've been playing for over half a decade. So that's a really unusual country to end up in. The signage though is quite decent from what I can tell. Road numbering is all right. It's not great. But there's not a lot of the country covered. You'll do fine if you know a couple of the bigger cities. You'll find signs to some of them. I'd say it's usually not a problem. Yeah, I've put Macedonia there as well. Then I'm going to put Serbia there too. Singapore. The thing about Singapore is that it's really easy to recognize whether you're in Singapore, because you'll find a lot of English and a lot of something that looks like Indonesian in a way. I mean, this may be totally wrong. Like it may have nothing to do with Indonesian whatsoever, but it looks like it to me. So like if you look at Singapore right here, let me just go, for example, you find a lot of English around. I mean, that probably isn't a good example, but a lot of the signs have sort of an English influence to it. Like it says road, it says East Drive, Street, Avenue. And you'll find a lot of English areas, smarter solutions for rail maintenance. But you'll also find a lot of stuff that just looks a bit Indonesian. Like, for example, I was just at that sign. Actually, wait, maybe that has something. No, it doesn't. If you didn't catch it, just rewind a couple of seconds. That sign with the street and the avenue and stuff, like the names of them, they sound somewhat Indonesian. It might just be me, but I find it easy to recognize. The problem about Singapore is, where in Singapore are you? And that is mainly the reason why I'm going to put it into A and not into S. Because Singapore has a lot of street view coverage. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to tell where you are. Next is Slovenia. And I'm tempted to put Slovenia to Croatia, because it suffers from a lot of the same problems in that it doesn't really have a lot of road numbers on signs. It just shows you a couple of close towns and nothing else. And I think it's slightly better though. The country itself is smaller, which is an advantage, and it's more condensed, while Croatia is just sort of spread out like that, which is the main reason why I'm going to put Slovenia into a B tier. Not a good B tier, but a B tier nonetheless. South Africa is the next one. And I like South Africa in general because it has a lot of good signs around. The problem with these signs is that the roads they refer to aren't really ordered that well. Like they, similar to a lot of other countries, they're just wherever. Like you may have noticed that I looked through like this whole part, all of which had roads starting with a 3. You'll probably get different roads in other parts of the country. But then again, up here, still a 3. You'll find 5, 2, 3. Like this is just not how I like my roads to be numbered. You'll usually find, as I said, signs to decently sized cities, but you'll have to find them on the map first. I'd say it's a very big country again. So I'm probably going to put it into B, like upper B tier, but still a B tier. I often, like, if I don't find good signs, I struggle with it less now than I did early on, but it's very difficult to tell apart Australia and South Africa in some parts. So good signs are pretty much like needed to get close. South Korea next. That sort of similar to the Philippines. I've got mixed feelings with South Korea as well. Because as you can see there, first of all, since I don't know when, since today actually, the map doesn't really want to load all that well. It's sort of blurry a bit. And I don't really know why, because it's only in South Korea. Like you can see this like sort of, you can even see it here. This figure that covers South Korea and parts of North Korea and somehow makes the sea purple. The thing about South Korea is that you often find decent signs that point you to bigger cities. So that's helpful. The problem with South Korea is I was looking at, I mean, it's true for almost all of them, but if you look at this, it says Gumi right here. The thing is, if you look at Gumi, sure, it's this area and Gumi is placed in the middle of this area. But the city Gumi is down here, not up there. For Gumi, it's relatively clear, but there are some other cities for which this is completely unclear. Like sometimes you won't even think of it, like Gimcheon. Maybe you read that on a sign and think, well, I found it finally. Let's put my marker here. You know what Gimcheon is? This is Gimcheon. Why would you put the map for South Korea is awful, which is the main reason why I'm going to put it into B. It sort of has the same problems as Japan. It's difficult to read signs. Street names aren't particularly useful. All that stuff. But yeah, it has signs to decently sized cities. So that stops it from going down into C tier. Spain. What I really like about Spain is that each province has their own way of numbering roads. For example, if you see roads that start with a C dash, that's Catalonia. So that's this area up here. For example, you'll find M roads around Madrid. You'll find why are there A roads here? That's Andalusia, I guess, down here. So that's an A. You'll find, was it CL or something up here? Yeah, CL for was it Comunidad or something like that? I can't remember. For Leon, the L is for Leon. Castilian, yeah, Castilla and Leon. So that makes it really easy if you recognize them to find out in which part of Spain you are. You'll find exactly the same. That's great as well. In Gran Canaria, you'll find GC. Over here in Tenerife, you'll find TF. In Mallorca, you'll find MA. So it's brilliant system. So in general, once you've figured out one of those roads, smooth sailing. So I'll put Spain into an A tier. Now Sri Lanka. The thing about Sri Lanka is that usually it's very easy to find writing of which town you're in. You'll find that almost everywhere. The problem is, look at how many towns there are everywhere. And they all look so similar to someone who's not familiar with like Sri Lankan naming systems and stuff like that. So it's really difficult. Like, look at how many these are. You can't just read the name of a small town somewhere and then go, oh, right, I'm looking for it on the map. Like, if you don't at least have a somewhat decent idea of where in Sri Lanka this is, you'll really struggle to find it. You'll usually, if you're on a bigger road, you sometimes find the name of the road you're on. And that helps a lot. But in general, Sri Lanka is mainly hard because there's so many small towns everywhere. So I'm going to put Sri Lanka into B. With some good science, it's doable. Without good science, it's a struggle. The next country that I'm going to put into S is Switzerland. Because one thing that's brilliant about Switzerland is that it's multilingual and you can see that. So if you're down here, you'll find a lot of Italian signs and you can easily tell where you are. If you find a lot of French, you're over here in Lausanne, Genf, Yverdon, Neuchâtel area. And if you find a lot of German, you're somewhere here. Also, you'll find a lot of signs towards different towns. You'll find a lot of town names everywhere. It's just generally not a difficult country to play, in my opinion. The only thing that's slightly bugging me is the road numbering system. But, you can't have everything. Well, if you're not in Luxembourg, you know what I mean. Taiwan is the next one on the list. And, well, Taiwan is a bit of a mixed bag for me as well. If you find signs that tell you where you are, you're good. Like, it's easy to tell whether you're in Taiwan because you'll usually find those flower road signs somewhere. But beyond that, it's kind of difficult occasionally to figure out which city you're in exactly. Because basically the whole west coast of Taiwan is one giant city. So that can be a struggle. And I think I didn't show you that. Everything is covered here. And the whole east coast is covered as well, but that's probably a bit more easy to figure out that you're there. What you've also got covered is Pescadores, which you need to keep in mind, and Kinmen County over here. Those are also parts you need to think about when you think you're in Taiwan. I mean, this island down here as well, I've never seen that. That's official Google coverage as well, so I guess keep that in mind as well. The same as this and right here, I guess. So yeah, I'd say I'm kind of tempted between B and A, but I'm gonna put it into B. Upper cusp of the B tier, but it's not difficult to tell you're in Taiwan, but it's difficult to pinpoint, like really difficult. Like, look at this. Have fun pinpointing this. All right. Thailand. Again, even though I'm repeating myself, mixed bag. The one thing that's great about Thailand is its road numbering system. Ones are up here. Twos are over here. Threes are down here. Fours are down here. So if you're in Thailand, keep in mind keep a lookout for those road markers next to the road that I talked about with Romania. They do have similar ones in Thailand, where you often see the number of the road, and that tells you a lot already. The problem you have then is finding out which city you're in, which is not a problem, but finding the road itself is already a big help and should get you at least close enough to not fully fail. So, you know what? I'm gonna actually put Thailand into A. If you know what to look for, it's not too bad of a country. Tunisia goes into S. I like Tunisia as well. There's not a lot covered. It's quite easy to identify, and there's signs everywhere in Latin and in Arabic. So that's usually not a problem. You'll find signs to big cities everywhere. I don't think I've ever failed around in Tunisia. It's just really easy to play, but not in a boring kind of really easy to play. But it's just fun little country. What? So just noticed that. Is that an Italian island? Never seen that before. It is. Well, I've got to keep that in mind for the future, I guess. Yep, Tunisia S. Turkey. The thing about Turkey is that, again, it's a big country, and it is relative. If you're in a small city or town, you can relatively easily tell apart architectural wise, whether you're in the European part of it or much further east. And there was a little rule I made for myself, basically, in non-moving challenges, that said, whenever I don't know where this place could be, it's always in Turkey. And that was true for 8 out of 10 rounds. Because Turkey is ridiculously diverse in its landscape. And it's just a lot of stuff you don't see anywhere else. So I was always confused when I saw a new part of Turkey and was like, I've never seen this. Where could this be? So that's nice. It's definitely a beautiful country. Road numbering wise, it's poor. But yeah, can't always get everything. The good thing about Turkey as well is that you usually find signs. If you're not in a city, you'll usually find... forgot about that. I'll mention that afterwards. If you're not in a city, you'll usually find signs that tell you this city is 50 kilometers, this is 100 kilometers away. And those signs are the best signs ever. The problem in Turkey is, if you're in a big city, it's really difficult to find out which city you're in. Because Turkey doesn't... Turkish cities don't really put their city names anywhere. They just don't for some reason. And so that's one of the reasons why I've really struggled with Turkey occasionally, is that I just don't know which big city I'm in. Is it Istanbul? Is it Ankara? Is it Izmir? Antalya? I don't know. So I'm gonna put Turkey into B, or no, it has to be. I'd rather be in Turkey than in Serbia, so it has to be in an A. I definitely have to do some revising after putting those last few countries in. The United Arab Emirates, I'm going to put in an A right now. I'll explain why right now. The UAE doesn't have a lot of coverage. It's all just around here. It also has a lot of signs with road numbers on it, which is great. The D roads are all in Dubai. The S roads are in Sharjah, which is brilliant. And the F roads are in Fujairah. Again, great. West coast, east coast. If you're near the sea, you can tell that apart. As I said, you'll find lots of signs with road numbers on it. And you'll, even in cities, if the number on the road isn't enough to tell you, if you forgot that somehow, you'll usually find loads of mentions of the city name everywhere. So that's fine. It's just, the reason why it's not in S is that, first of all, it's quite difficult to pinpoint, from my experience. And if you're in here somewhere, you might struggle. Like, okay, that was probably a bad example. I shouldn't pick a photosphere. But on these sort of roads, you can go a few kilometers without finding signs that are useful and tell you where you are. So that's basically the one thing stopping it from being an S tier. Uganda is it's in a similar vein with the UAE, because most of the Ugandan coverage is Kampala and Entebbe. Like 99% of Ugandan coverage is around here. And everything else in Uganda is national parks. The thing is, it's not too difficult to tell these national parks apart. It's got Kidepo Valley National Park, Murchison Falls National Park, Queen Elizabeth National Park, and Lake Mburo National Park, and like a slight bit in Kibale National Park. If you have a look at it, like I had a tournament once where I knew I had to play in Uganda, and I looked at it before, and I got like 24,900 something, which was basically like, and like 4 of those locations were in national parks, and I just knew which national park it was. Which at this point, if you haven't looked at it before for a while and memorized it, that's impossible to beat. So I'm slightly biased towards Uganda. What's this, by the way? Okay, there's slight coverage over here as well. But yeah, I'd probably put it into an A. For me, at least. The UK. Now, the UK is difficult because if you find good signs, the UK can be very easy. The problem with the UK is that you can just as well land somewhere here and not find anything. Like for 5 minutes of driving, just nothing. Which is a problem because the UK isn't really small either. If you get lucky and find a highway sign for an M anyway, M whatever, you can get relatively close, god damn it, quickly. And Scotland is relatively easy to play. Does Northern Ireland have? Yeah, Northern Ireland covers as well. Can't remember being there more than 1 or 2 times. But yeah, I like Scotland. England itself, I don't actually know. Is Isle of Man? Yeah, Isle of Man is covered as well. Same goes for Guernsey. Oh no, Guernsey isn't. Is Jersey? Does Jersey belong to Britain or to France? Game, please. Okay, we'll never find out. It's got French names. Whatever. Yeah, I kind of, I'd like to put it into A, but in a lower tier of A. The good thing is I can understand, I can read everything. That sets it apart from, for example, Poland. But you do still need a bit of luck with signs, but not as much as in some of these countries down here. The Ukraine. I don't like the Ukraine. The sign, like the roads, are not really making a lot of sense. There's not a whole lot of signs. And even if you find signs, they sometimes point to cities that are far away, but don't give you a distance to them, which is pretty useless then. It's also very difficult. Like, if you're in a city, it's sometimes difficult to figure out where you are because they don't put the city name in a lot of places. Similar to Russia. The thing that Russia has an advantage over the Ukraine, and which is why I'm actually going to put the Ukraine in a tier lower than Russia, is that in the Ukraine, you don't really have rural places so much where you see signs saying, I don't know, Kiev 300 kilometers away. You have those in Russia, which is why I prefer Russia. Uruguay is a country I've had in GeoGuessr very little, so I don't actually know much about it. And whenever I had it in a non-moving round, I didn't get it because I didn't think about Uruguay at all. And I don't think I've ever been much outside of Montevideo in moving rounds. Like maybe I've been in Paisando once, or in Salto. I've had a couple in border control challenges. I've been in Rivera, I think, and like in a couple of those border towns. But in the middle of Uruguay, and let me show you, it is covered. I don't remember ever being there. And I'm not too fond of it either. But I can't even really, like, that's the only country that I can't even fully give a good rating, because I just don't really know. So I'm just gonna say, please let me find some good signs, because it's a small country. If I find a sign to a decently sized city, I'm probably gonna find a city. By the way, another country that I just noticed I haven't got in here, which is probably actually Puerto Rico. Does that belong to the US? It does. All right. That's why it's not in the list. Anyway, if I had to, I'd put that somewhere in an B tier as well, just because I remembered it right now. Before we get to the US. Okay. I always say I hate playing the US. I absolutely do. Because the thing is, if you're in a big city in the US, it's fine. If you're in a completely deserted area, like if you're in Nevada, it's fine. You'll find out where you are. If you are somewhere like here or anywhere really, where there's a lot of cities around, a lot of small towns maybe, like if you're here, you will never find out where you are. At least, okay, I should rephrase that. I will never find out where I am. Because I just, like, there's no useful signs anywhere. It's just this small town is here and maybe this small town is over there. And you can go from here to here through via Road 6. Like, because there's not 700 Road 6s in the US. But I have to say, even though it pains me to do this, I have to still put it in the B tier somewhere. Because if you find good signs, it's not difficult. It's just you do find those signs really rarely if you're in a bad place. Then again, that is true of a lot of these countries. Like Russia is exactly the same. South Korea probably as well. Kyrgyzstan. All of these countries kind of. And the last country on our list is Venezuela, which isn't covered. Why did I put Venezuela in there? Why didn't I look that up? God damn it. All right, Venezuela stays out of the list. I did think about it. Why Venezuela? All right. So let me have another look through the list. S countries, we've got Andorra, Iceland, Ireland, San Marino, Luxembourg, Macau, Romania, Malta, Senegal, Switzerland, Tunisia. Just thinking about this now, all of those fit. All of those are perfect. I'm gonna leave the S tier alone. A tier, Monaco, Norway, Austria, Belgium, Bhutan, Bolivia, Canada, Curacao, Slovakia, Denmark, Estonia, Lithuania, Germany, Finland, Hong Kong, Hungary, Kenya, Laos, Lesotho, Eswatini, Macedonia, Malaysia, New Zealand, Nigeria, Serbia, Singapore, Spain, Thailand, Turkey, UAE, Uganda, and Great Britain. I would like to change a couple things here. I would like to move Slovakia down to the B tier. I would also like to move Macedonia down to the B tier. I would also like to move Serbia down to the B tier. The rest is fine. From the B tier, Poland can stay. South Africa stays. Taiwan stays. Albania stays. Australia stays. Peru goes down. Yeah, Peru goes down. Botswana stays. Bulgaria stays. Does it stay? Yeah, Bulgaria stays. Does it? Yeah. Chile is fine. Czechia is fine. US, Latvia, Ghana, Guatemala, Sweden, Italy, Japan, Jordan, Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan goes down as well. Mexico, Netherlands, Philippines, Portugal, Russia, South Korea, Slovenia, Sri Lanka, and Uruguay. Sri Lanka goes down. Uruguay stays. C tier. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, Argentina and Brazil. Argentina goes down. Brazil stays. Cambodia stays. These are fine. Greece stays because at least it's recognizable by their alphabet. Indonesia stays. Israel stays. Mongolia stays. Ukraine stays. Yep. So the D countries are officially France and Argentina. If you want an overview over the whole tier list again, let me zoom out a bit. There you go. I hope you enjoyed at least somewhat this long video. If you even watched it, if you just came here to see the end result, then that's fine as well, I guess. Yep. Next week we get back to the usual. The Reddit League season will start, maybe with a new name. We're just voting on that as well. The name might change. I hope it doesn't, but it might. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.